everybody, Lisa Romani here with a Breakthrough Life Coach, and today I'd like to do a video about narcissistic dads and share with you some of my experiences, both professionally and personally, and hopefully some of you will feel validated and you'll feel like there's someone out there that understands you, and perhaps you won't feel so alone, and maybe just knowing what you're dealing with can help you feel better about your situation. Like, I just did a video recently on sons of narcissistic moms, and I made sure that in the beginning of the video, I said that we have to understand that narcissism exists on a spectrum. It's not a black and white issue. And, narcissism can be overt and it could be covert. It's not easy to spot sometimes, then other times it's really easy to spot. Like, if you have a friend who has an overt narcissistic dad, somebody who's overtly aggressive, overtly grandiose, overtly full of himself. He's a womanizer. It's all about him. He abuses the children both physically, and verbally. That can be easy to spot, but it's not always easy to spot. I've had the experience of having clients who have had dads who were preachers, or they have had dads who were surgeons. They've had dads who were very well regarded in their communities, but at home, the dads were aloof. The dads wanted nothing to do with their children. The dads acted like their children were an inconvenience. And, and in that situation, it can be harder to spot because dads seem so highly regarded outside the home. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that you could have 10 people at a table talking about their narcissistic parents, and everyone can have a different experience. So it's important that we recognize that. But let's talk about some of the obvious things. So you can have an overtly narcissistic dad who is physically abusive, who is verbally abusive, who marginalizes you, who is critical of you, and that could be pretty easy to spot, And then you can have a dad who, you can be confused by. You can have a dad who doesn't really lift you up, but you hear through the grapevine that he's bragging about you, and that can be really, really confusing. Maybe in front of you he's aloof, and maybe in front of you he ignores you, but when you hear him, what he says to other people, you're confused because he's seeming to praise you. So that could be related to dad wanting to seem to other people that, yes, my son is good, or yes, my daughter is awesome. So in that moment, it benefits your dad to say something kind about you, because in that moment, he's really living through you almost, and the praise that he's gaining about you, he's taking it like, yes, you're praising me because my daughter did this or my son's doing that. And that can be really, really confusing. We have fathers who, a big one is they lack empathy for the children. So if you're the son or the daughter of a narcissistic dad, what you'll notice is that there's an absolute lack of empathy for your experiences, for your feelings, for your wants, for your needs, for your dreams and desires. Just not interested. Narcissistic dads are very entitled. They feel entitled to exploit you. They feel entitled to exploit other people. They feel entitled to having you worry about their feelings, and they feel entitled not to have to worry about yours. So a typical scenario would be your dad calls you in the middle of the night because his water heater breaks, and when you and your family need a ride to the airport, and it's only 15 minutes from his house, he says no. Or when you ask him, he's annoyed. He's huffing and puffing, and he has 1,000 reasons why you should be asking someone else to take you to the airport. And what you'll notice is there'll be a theme that mirrors this idea that you're supposed to be there for me, but I don't have to be there for you. So I've had the experience of having, a father who is depressed say to his son and to his daughters, like, you should care about me, I'm depressed. And then when the father feels better, he gets out of his slump, and then the child is upset. The child is mocked for having feelings. What's the matter with you? How could you feel this way? What are you, a punk ass or something? And the father has really no consideration for this idea that his parents, his children, have been there for him, and he is not being there for his children. So there's a lack of empathy, there's exploitation, and there's a deep sense of entitlement that dad feels that the children should be taking care of him. It's really, really interesting because a narcissistic father does expect his children to be there for him in a way that he has never been there for his children. What I saw, what my dad did to my brother, was my dad berated my brother. He called him a dope. He called him a jackass. You know, when my brother is a very sensitive soul, and my father would mock him because he was sensitive. You know, he would say, "Don't be a sissy ass. Don't be a little baby." And so instead of being nurtured by my father, and instead of being understood and embraced by his father, my brother felt rejected and abandoned and invalidated by my father. You know, how it showed up with us, the girls, as we had needs, what happened was our father found ways to make it seem like we didn't have a right to have a need. So, you know, he made sure to make sure that we didn't rely on him. And I think that was because he didn't want us to need him, and he didn't want to feel obligated to us. Where as things have shifted and he's gotten older, it's more where he feels entitled to have the ability to lean on us in ways that we weren't able to lean on him. And I found that that's a common thread when I'm coaching my clients and inside my classes, that does come up. I'm supposed to be there for my parent in a way that my parent was never there for me. I found that when it comes to the sons of narcissistic fathers, when boys get through puberty and they start developing their muscles, their dads can feel threatened. And that's when the criticism can really kick into high gear. I've had the experience of men telling me that when they brought home their first girlfriend, dad did nothing but criticize the young man in front of the girlfriend, like minimizing him, shaming him, wanting to feel bad about himself as a young man, you know, in front of this female. I've heard clients say that dad has put the female down and has done anything he could to make sure that this young boy has no independence, no sense of selfhood. I am invalid. I don't know who myself is. I noticed in my own experience with my ex-husband and my son, the continual rejection of the ability for my son to connect to his father in a loving way. And as anytime my son exerted any sense of independence, my ex-husband would poo-poo it. He would put it down. It was almost like my ex-husband knew that my son needed him in this warm, nurturing way, and he was hell-bent on not giving it to him. It was almost like, I'm not doing it because I know you need it. We have fathers who live vicariously through their sons. So we have a son who wants to go, let's say, become an airplane pilot, and dad says, no, you have to be a football star because I was a football star. Dad wanting to live through his son, and almost like the son has been created, there's this life, and dad doesn't want to let go of his life. You know, he's not accepting that he's getting older and now it's his son's turn, and now here's an opportunity, and he feels like he's entitled to live through the son's experience. And when the son doesn't live up to the father's experience, then we have issues. We have the berating, we have the discarding, we have the minimizing, we have the marginalizing, you know, and all that fun stuff. I've had clients who have had narcissistic dads who have females who have had their dads insinuate that they're not supposed to go out and date, that it's their job to take care of their father. I've had clients tell me that they've kind of felt like weird, like dad was jealous of my boyfriends, and it was just like odd. I've had clients say that their fathers were jealous of their friends. And so it seems to be that narcissistic parents want to live through their children. Narcissistic parents want to create a dependency, almost like cripple their child emotionally, so the children cannot exceed past them or excel past them or have a life outside of them. It seems like narcissistic parents want to have a child in their life that they can lean on, that they can draw off of. You know, sometimes it's because they want the child to take care of them, and sometimes it's because they need a whipping boy. They need someone to help them feel better about themselves. And what better way to do that than to berate a child that already loves you and make it almost impossible for this child to ever spread their wings and go out and be an absolute individual. So some of the things that I've noticed across the board, because what I do is I look for patterns. And what I notice in men who have narcissistic fathers, there are a few things that stick out in me. Sometimes men present with this fear of being bullied by other people, where they're hypervigilant about being bullied, and they're concerned about people getting over on them, or they're concerned that people think they're a pushover, or they're concerned that people are mocking them, you know, they're not very trustworthy, and they're very hypervigilant about this idea like they're not going to miss it. They're not going to stand down. You know, they're men now, and no one's going to get over them. And that could be because, at least in my experience, in my humble opinion, it could be that because there was so much trauma and so much abuse and such a sense of powerlessness as a little boy, that as a man, no one's going to get over on me. Like, I'm going to be on it, you know, which can be very disruptive. Because if that's your experience, that is absolutely not your fault. But it's disruptive because you're never relaxed. It's disruptive because you never trust. It's disruptive because you're always looking out for what you don't want, opposed to enjoying what you do want. You always feel like you have to be on guard, like, when's the next attack coming? And that's not your fault. When you've lived with and loved a man who is a narcissist, and that person is your dad, the rug is constantly being pulled out from underneath you. You're in a state of fear. You're in a state of impending doom. When is the shoe going to drop again? And I think when we get older, you know, we never really quite lose that until we've worked through it. And so our defense is to stay hypervigilant and to be really, really on guard. And the slightest sense that we pick up on from someone else that leads us to believe that this person is trying to push us around the way our fathers did, we react. So I see that that's a very common trait. Some abused sons of narcissistic fathers have extremely low self-esteem. And they've been beaten down so much that, you know, they can't move forward in their lives, right? Of course, we can eventually, but it takes some time to work through. I've had clients who have had drug addiction and alcoholism, and some clients who have said that they've been suicidal. You know, they've been scapegoated, and they have tremendous shame, and they just can't get themselves motivated. Well, to me, it makes sense. When you have such a strong male energy dominating you, and, you know, pulling out the feathers of your wings, every time you grow a feather, he pulls it out, you know, and you're not getting the sustenance and you're not getting supported. It's really, really difficult to have the sense of self that you need to really follow your dreams and to move forward. That doesn't mean you can't learn how to overcome that, because you absolutely can. You know, I've seen it happen in my own life. I've done it. But it totally makes sense to me to be an adult who has been so berated, especially if your dad, you know, if you've suffered like physical abuse. Some narcissistic dads are like ridiculous. Like, they beat their children, and then they do what they can to convince their child that it was their fault that they got beat. You know, and this is the backwards rationalization and the entitlement that a narcissist thinks that they have over dominating their family. And it's absolutely ridiculous. But when you're a child in that environment, you don't know this is ridiculous. You're just trying to survive. And you've got just a certain number of defense mechanisms to try to protect you and keep you safe from this craziness. And none of it's your fault. And so sons of narcissistic fathers can suffer from great low self-esteem, procrastination, drug addiction, alcoholism. They can suffer with the fear of being dominated by somebody, and so they can be hypersensitive and reactive to people. They can walk around like the person in the room who's like super, super sensitive and go, don't talk to that guy because he has a problem with everybody, and it's important that we recognize if that's us, that's important that we recognize why that might be, because it's not our fault, and try to do what we can to work through it. And so, the sons of narcissistic dads have a big trouble with trusting other people. And sometimes what will happen is they can become codependent, or depending on the personality, someone who's been abused by a narcissist can take on high narcissistic traits themselves. So it's a matter of self-preservation, right? And again, anybody who's really, really willing to be committed to self-awareness, I think, at least has a shot in recovering from this type of abuse. So daughters of narcissistic fathers, very oftentimes, and again, it's not a black and white issue, but very oftentimes daughters of narcissistic fathers attract partners who are similar to this energy. And so if dad was abusive and you felt rejected by this male energy, it is, why aren't I good enough? And how it plays out in a female's life is, I'm going to convince this person that I am good enough. So what do? We don't attract people who think we're good enough. We attract people who reinforce that we're not good enough. And the patterns repeat themselves. I've had clients of narcissistic dads present with bulimia and anorexia, self-harm. I've had clients of women who have had narcissistic dads who have been terribly, terribly codependent, who lack the ability to hold on to themselves. Professional women, doctors, lawyers, you name it, who in their business life, in their career life, they're able to do what they need to do. But when it comes to the home life, they're very insecure. They're very unsure of their personal power. They don't know how to set a boundary. They live in fear of upsetting this person. And their whole life can become about making sure that this person isn't angry. And behind the scenes or below the veil, what's happening is, one day I'm going to say it the right way, or one day I'm going to do the right thing, and he will finally approve of me. So that's a theme that I've noticed with daughters of narcissistic fathers. And again, it's not a black and white issue. And there are plenty of times that females who have been abused by narcissists can take on high narcissistic traits as well. Whereas we can have a situation where a female had a narcissistic dad, and now she's transferring her anger, her resentment, her rage, and all that, her distrust of her father onto the men that she meets. And so even if that's your situation and you have a hard time trusting men and you're more domineering in the relationship, you really need to ask yourself why that might be. If your partners are complaining, or if the relationship feels unbalanced, try to figure out if, you've had a dad or a man in your life that's tried to dominate you and who has done his best to demoralize you and invalidate you. And how are you handling that? How are you handling that trauma? How are you working that out? So it's important that, I think, and this isn't about, identifying narcissistic parents so that we can throw them all into the wind and go no contact. Sometimes we have to do that. If we're being consistently abused by, I don't care who it is, it could be a sibling, it could be a coworker, it could be a neighbor, it could be a best friend from the past. If there is consistent and ongoing abuse, sometimes the only choice we have is to I have to go no contact, out of self-preservation. But the reason we talk and we do, at least the reason I do these videos, is for self-awareness, because so many of us present with overreactivity or hypersensitivity, or we're stuck in fight or flight, or we have alcoholism, or we have severe codependency or suicidal ideation, or we're depressed, or we've been diagnosed with this or diagnosed with that. And, we're dealing with the symptoms of what is happening now, and what we should be really considering is how we got to where we are. If we could spend some time figuring out the cause and effect of who we are, like, why am I this way? Why do I attract that type of a female? Or why do I attract that type of a partner? Or why do I consistently attract these types of relationships? If we can spend some time and think logically and realistically and from the observer space, why do I think I am the way I am? Without shame, you'll be able to figure out why you are the way you are. It's like a puzzle, right? And I think the benefit of that is helping us to reduce shame. Because so many of us, I know for myself, when I was going through my first marriage, I was very sensitive and very hypersensitive, and I was unhappy most of the time. And I never took the time to figure out why. So I was aware that I was unhappy, and I was aware that I was blessed in many ways, and so I just felt ashamed, and I just felt guilty. I never took the time because I didn't know to take the time to ask myself why I felt that way. Like, what was going on in my life and what was going on with my partner and the way that we communicated. What was going on there that was making me feel the way I felt. I never even thought about it. I thought that the problem was the marriage. And what I discovered was, yes, it was the marriage, but the marriage was really a mirror for the relationship that I had had with my parents, especially my mom. Over the years, I've noticed that my ex-husband was, both. He was a mixture of, in my opinion, my mom and my dad. And so I was reacting in so many ways like I was this child that was but on some level I knew I wasn't a child. So ego was like, you're not pushing me around, So it was completely below the veil. I was doing the best I could with the level of awareness that I had at the time. And what I learned over the years was that investigating my past, thinking about the types of parents I had, identifying their parenting styles, being curious about their personalities, being curious about their pasts, understanding why they were the way they were. My dad's mom committed suicide and his father was a violent alcoholic, right? Hello. That's a terrible way to grow up. And my father became more of a narcissist. It's all about me. It's all about me. I have to protect myself. Everybody else is a threat. I'm going to take advantage of them before they can take advantage of me. And I'm never going to feel vulnerable, ever. And no one's ever allowed to want anything from me and need anything from me. He's really like preserving himself, right? I get it, but that doesn't mean that we didn't suffer as children. That doesn't mean that when my sister needed him the most, and when he turned on her and labeled her, and she suffered as a result of that when she needed her daddy the most, that doesn't mean she didn't suffer. Does not mean she didn't suffer. But what happens is when we take the time to identify how our parents have affected us and our personalities and our psychology and our emotional stages of development, then the adults that we are make sense. And that's how we slowly become above the veil. We are no longer part of the codependent and unconscious matrix. We're no longer part of the unconscious paradigm. And it's those moments of self-awareness and self-acceptance that we're reconciling the past, and we're learning to live above the veil, and we're learning to create a new paradigm. I will have to say that it is never the goal to get stuck. It is never the goal to live your life pointing the finger at people. It is the goal to understand what happened and then to move forward in love and light. It is the goal to let go of that which no longer serves you. That is the goal. But sometimes we do get stuck along the way because we are needing to hold on to that anger so that we can protect ourselves. I was there for a while, and now, on my path, especially as I get older, I'm learning that it makes sense to reconcile the past. Now that I have self-love, I'm able to exert boundaries. I know who I am. I'm not going to feel responsible and obligated to my father, even though I'm sure he wishes I would. I'm not going to. And that's not because I'm trying to punish him. It's just because I have a boundary now. It's just a boundary. Although when you're dealing with a narcissistic person, every time you say no, they feel like you're threatening them and they feel like you're punishing them. But that's because that's how they operate. When a narcissist sets a boundary, they're discarding you and they're doing it to hurt you. When somebody like you, for instance, or myself, who recognizes, I don't want this in my life anymore because of the pain it has brought me in the past, and we set a boundary, we can do that out of love. It's not to punish the person. When I tell my dad, no, Dad, you can't live with me, I'm not doing that to punish him. I'm just setting a loving boundary. The last person my father wants to live with as he gets older is me. The last person. And the last person that I want to live with at this stage of my life is my father. It just wouldn't be a healthy dynamic. And so better to be honest about that and put it out there and work with the truth and work with what's best for both people than to ignore that and end up in a swampy situation. And it's unfortunate how many people, how many adult children of narcissistic parents end up being the only child that can take care of their parents in their old age. So many of you are suffering with that situation where you've had a parent abuse you your whole life and now you're the only one around that can help manage her care or his care. Very, very difficult. And my heart absolutely goes out to you. And my suggestion in that situation is to do all you can to understand and love the self. Do all you can to make peace with whatever is on your plate so that you can move forward, non-resistant and not feeling angry about having or not getting stuck in anger. Anger is a normal feeling, but do what you can to move through the anger and to reconcile it. Make sure you ask for help. Reach out to as many resources as possible. Go to the state, go to your city, go to the hospitals, call the Social Security Bureau, call Medicaid, call Medicare. Do whatever you possibly can. Find out about your parents' insurance company. Do everything that you possibly can to make sure that you have the help you need as a caretaker, especially if you're the one left holding the bag. And especially if you've been abused by this person your entire life. Because that's a tough pill to swallow, dear ones. Tough pill to swallow. So if you are the son of a narcissistic father or you are the daughter of a narcissistic father, know that you are not alone. Know that there are millions of us that understand. We just don't talk about it, But I think the more that we do talk about it, the more that we explore it, the easier it is for us to tell our truth. And the easier it is for us to share our experiences with other people without shame. And then before you know it, you're attracting people into your life that have had similar experiences. So just keep in mind that narcissistic parents are entitled, they lack empathy, they exploit their children, they want to create a sense of dependency on the children, they look to dominate their children, they can be jealous and envious of their children, and they want to very oftentimes live through their children. If they're complimenting their children, that's because it makes them look good. They're literally taking yeah, my daughter's awesome. I did that, They're taking the accolades as if they're responsible for your accomplishments. Be careful not to get caught up in that. If you can observe it, you can detach from it, and you no longer have to be pulled around by your nose because of it. Dear one, stay strong. You're not alone, and always strive for the light within you. You are the light. Namaste. Bye for now.